I've told this story exactly once before to a state trooper in a roadside office outside of Harlan County, Kentucky. He wrote everything down, nodded in the right places, and then told me I'd probably just gotten turned around in the dark, that I'd stumbled into one of the old, unincorporated communities that dot the eastern Kentucky hills, places that don't show up on GPS because nobody ever bothered to register them. He said it like that explained everything. It didn't explain anything. I'm 34 years old. I work in logistics for a freight company based out of Lexington. I drive for a living, not trucking, but coordination runs, checking waypoints, verifying delivery conditions at remote sites. I know how to read a road. I know how to use a map. I've driven through every county in this state at least twice, and I've never once gotten so lost that I couldn't find my way back. What happened in October of last year is the only exception, and I've spent every night since trying to find a version of it that makes sense. I was doing a solo run out to a distribution verification site near Benham, a small town tucked up in the mountains about 3 hours southeast of Lexington. The job itself was straightforward: check the site, photograph the loading conditions, file a report. I'd done it 100 times. I planned to be back in Lexington before midnight. The roads out that way are not forgiving. 2-lane state routes that follow the ridge lines, no shoulders, drop-offs on one side and rock face on the other. My GPS works fine until it doesn't. Dead zones are common in the hollows, signal dropping out for like 10 or 15 minutes at a time before coming back. I know this. I account for it. I've driven that stretch of Route 421 enough times that I don't need the GPS anyway. What I didn't account for was the detour. There was a slide on 421, a section of road blocked off with orange cones and a hand-painted sign that said road closed. Follow detour. There was an arrow pointing left onto a county road I didn't recognize. No route number, just the arrow. I assumed it was a temporary maintenance detour, the kind that sends you 10 miles out of your way and dumps you back on the main road. I turned left and followed it. The county road turned to gravel after about 2 miles. My GPS showed nothing. Not the road I was on, not any road nearby. Just a gray blank and a spinning circle where the map data should have been. I figured I was in a dead zone and kept going, expecting the detour to resolve itself. The road kept climbing. The tree cover got thicker. My headlights were doing maybe 40 feet of good in either direction, and everything beyond that was just black. The temperature dropped. I noticed it because my truck's display read 41 degrees when I'd turned off 421, and now it read 34. 7 degrees colder in 20 minutes of driving. I told myself it was the elevation. I kept going. After about 25 minutes on the gravel road, I came around a bend and saw lights below me. A cluster of them, maybe 30 or 40, warm yellow through the trees. A valley. Buildings. I felt the particular relief you feel when you've been driving in the dark and suddenly realize you're not as alone as you thought. I followed the road down. The village sat at the bottom of a narrow hollow between 2 ridges. Maybe 15 or 20 structures. Wood-framed houses, mostly dark. A few with lights in the windows. A building that looked like a general store or community hall, its front porch lit by a single bare bulb. A gravel road running through the center with smaller paths branching off toward the houses. No street signs. No mailboxes I could see. No vehicles of any kind. I pulled up in front of the lit building and got out. The air was cold, colder than it had been on the ridge, which didn't make sense for a valley. and completely silent. No insects, no wind, nothing. My footsteps on the gravel sounded too loud. I stood beside my truck for a moment, just listening, and the silence pressed back at me like something physical. The door of the building opened before I reached the porch. A man stepped out. Older, maybe late 60s, wearing canvas work pants and a flannel shirt. He had the kind of face that's been outside in all weather for decades. Deep lines, careful eyes. He looked at me the way you look at something you've been expecting but not necessarily wanting. "You're lost," he said. It wasn't a question. "Detour off 421, I said. "GPS stopped working. I'm trying to get back to Benham." He nodded slowly. "You'll want to head back the way you came. Road out is the same road in." Something about the way he said it made me stay where I was. "Is there another way out? A faster route?" "No," he said, "just that. No explanation." I looked down the main road through the village. At the far end, maybe 200 yards away, I could see where it continued, disappeared into the tree line heading up the opposite ridge. "What about that way?" He was quiet for a moment. "That road doesn't go anywhere useful." Behind him, through the open door, I could see the interior of the building. A long room, wood floors, a few tables. 2 people sitting at one of them, not moving, watching me. An older woman and a younger man, maybe mid-20s. Neither of them said anything. The younger man had his hands flat on the table in front of him, and he was watching me with an expression I couldn't read. Not hostile, not welcoming. Something in between that felt worse than either. "How many people live here?" I asked. "Enough," the man said. I asked if I could use a phone. He said there was no phone service here. I asked for water. I wanted a reason to go inside, to see more of the room, to talk to the other 2 people, to understand what I was looking at. He stepped fully into the doorway. Not aggressively, just fully, filling it. "You should head back," he said. "Road's easier in the dark than you'd think if you know where you're going. You go back the way you came, stay on the gravel, don't take any of the smaller paths off it. You'll hit the county road inside of 20 minutes. Don't take any of the smaller paths. I hadn't seen any smaller paths on the way in. I'd been paying attention." I was about to get back in my truck when the door to the nearest house opened. A woman came out onto the porch, young, early 20s maybe, dark hair, wearing a dress that looked wrong for the temperature. She stood on the porch and looked at me, and there was something urgent in her face, something she was trying to communicate without words, without movement, with nothing but her eyes. I looked at her. She looked at me. Then her gaze moved, just slightly, barely a shift, to the old man in the doorway, and then back to me. The old man turned to look at her. She went inside immediately, the door closed. "You should go," the old man said. His voice hadn't changed, still calm, still measured, but something underneath it had. I got back in my truck. I sat there for a moment with the engine running, looking at the building in my rearview mirror. The old man stood on the porch, watching me. Not moving, just watching. I looked at the house, where the young woman had been. The porch was empty. The curtain in the front window moved, just slightly, and then was still. I put the truck in reverse and started back up the road. About 3 minutes up the hill, I saw the first of the smaller paths, branching off to the right into the trees, just wide enough for a person. I hadn't noticed it on the way down. Then another to the left, then a third. All of them dark, all of them heading away from the main gravel track into the tree cover. all of them with the particular quality of paths that get used regularly. The ground at the entrance to each one was worn flat, the grass pushed back, the edges defined. These weren't deer trails. People walked these paths. People walked them often. I didn't take any of them. I stopped the truck halfway up the ridge and looked back down into the valley. The lights were multiplying. When I'd arrived, there had been lights in maybe 4 or 5 windows. Now there were lights everywhere. Every structure I could see had windows lit. And there were figures in the road below, moving. I couldn't make out details at that distance, but there were more people than I'd seen, more than I'd expected from a settlement that size. They weren't moving toward the road I was on. They were just present in a way they hadn't been before. I watched for about 90 seconds. Then I drove. My GPS came back online 4 miles up. I was on an unnamed forest road running parallel to a state route 2 miles east. I followed it north, hit the state route, and was in Benham 40 minutes later. I filed my report on autopilot, got back in my truck, and drove 3 hours back to Lexington in silence. I called the state police the next morning. The trooper took my report and told me about unincorporated communities and getting turned around in the dark. I gave him the GPS coordinates of where I'd stopped on the ridge. He checked something and told me there were no recorded structures in that hollow. No property records, no utility registrations, nothing. I went back in the daylight 3 weeks later. I found the county road. I found the gravel road. I followed it all the way down to the bottom of the hollow, driving slowly, looking for the turn-off paths I'd seen in the dark. I found 2 of them, narrow trails leading into the tree cover, exactly where I remembered them. I stopped and looked at the entrance to the nearest one. I didn't follow it. The clearing at the bottom of the hollow was exactly what it looked like from the road. Overgrown, empty, reclaimed. The remnants of a concrete foundation half buried in the grass. A section of gravel road running through the center of the clearing. Weeds growing up through it. Trees pressing in from both sides. Whatever had been here had been gone for a long time. I stood in the center of that clearing in the middle of the afternoon with full October sunlight coming down through the trees, and I tried to reconcile what I was standing in with what I'd seen 3 weeks earlier. The geography was right. The shape of the hollow, the position of the ridges, the way the gravel road came in from the north. This was the place. This was exactly the place. There was nothing here. I did the research when I got home. Historical records for that hollow showed a coal company town. It's 18 structures, a community hall, a company store. Established in 1931 and fully abandoned in 1959 when the mine closed. Every structure demolished or burned as per company policy. The land reverted to the county. No one had lived there in over 60 years. I found one other thing. A local historical society archive. Scanned documents from the 1960s included a report from a county surveyor who had visited the hollow in 1961 to document the demolition. At the bottom of his report, in handwriting that had been transcribed by whoever digitized the document, was a single additional note that wasn't part of the official survey. It read, "Locals in Benham report that travelers occasionally report seeing lights in the hollow at night. Have informed them this is impossible, as structures no longer exist. They do not appear to find this reassuring." I stared at that line for a long time. I don't have an explanation. I've looked for one atmospheric phenomena, collective misperception, the way the mind fills in shapes from darkness and expectation. None of it accounts for the old man in the doorway. None of it accounts for the young woman on the porch and what she was trying to tell me with her eyes. None of it accounts for the paths that showed clear signs of regular use or the lights that multiplied while I drove away. What I come back to every time is the thing the old man said that I couldn't explain, about the smaller paths, about staying on the gravel, about not taking the roads that led into the trees. He told me how to get out. Whatever else was happening in that hollow, whatever those lights were and whoever those people were. He stood in the doorway of a building that shouldn't exist and told me exactly how to leave. I've thought about the young woman a lot, about the look on her face, about the way her eyes moved to the old man and back to me. I think she wanted me to take her with me. I think about that more than anything else. More than the lights, more than the silence, more than the foundations I found in the clearing. I think about her standing on that porch in the cold, in a dress too thin for October, and the way she looked at me and the way she went inside when he turned to look at her. I drove away. I don't know if I had a choice. I don't know what would have happened if I'd stopped, if I'd rolled down the window, if I'd said something to her. I don't know what those paths led to, or what was waiting in the trees, or why nobody in that village had a vehicle, or why the temperature dropped to 7 degrees on the way down, and I never noticed it climb back up on the way out. I know that I got home. I know that the hollow was empty in the daylight. I know that a county surveyor noted reports of lights there in 1961, and that 60 years later, I saw them too. And I know that somewhere in the hills outside Harlan County, there are paths leading into the trees that a man I can't explain told me specifically not to take. I listened to him. I hope that was the right call.